All right, guys, so we got to talk about some pretty devastating footage of a Democrat getting silenced by Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire doing a committee hearing in Tennessee about a bill banning gender reassignment surgeries in Tennessee. Now, Matt Walsh showed up to this hearing, and let's just say it did not go well for Democrats who were questioning Matt Walsh about this subject matter, as Matt Walsh came with the facts, right? He came with the facts and the data specifically on this claim that the left always makes about how these so-called gender-affirming healthcare procedures are necessary because it reduces the self-deletion rate of transgender kids. Take a look.
Just a quick question for you. We've heard in the news last week and even today that it's pro-life to vote against this bill. We've heard that suicides are prevalent, and suicide has impacted my family, so I'm sensitive when I hear something like that. I've read some of the stuff that you've done, and I was wondering, can you speak to the statistics of mental health and suicidal tendencies for the people who have gone through transition and for people who have not? In your studies, from what I've read, can you speak to that?
Mr. Walsh, you recognize?
Sure. Well, the claim that doing the chemical castration drugs or surgery or hormonal intervention, the claim that this prevents suicide or has positive psychological effects down the line is utterly, totally baseless. There are no credible long-term studies that bear that out. And one of the reasons for that is that there couldn't possibly be any credible long-term studies because we've never done this to kids on this scale ever before in history. So this current, shall we say, crop of children, they are the guinea pigs. This is all experimental. We're sort of trying it out on them to see if it works. Now, they have attempted a few times to do studies, and the interesting thing is that the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, WPATH, which is a radical far-left pro-trans organization, they commissioned a study to try to prove that that hormones and puberty blockers decrease suicide rates among trans-identified youth. And even in their own study, they found that they couldn't prove it. They couldn't make that link because it's just not possible to do. The other thing I would mention too is that the number of trans-identified youth has skyrocketed in recent years. We're talking about exponential 10x, 20x growth. Just huge numbers have increased. And what we hear from the pro-trans side is that, well, this is not a social contagion. It's just that, there's always been this many trans people. It's just that they were not in an affirming environment before in history, and so they couldn't come out. And now, for the first time, trans people have the ability to live their truth, so to speak. Well, if that's the case, and there have always been these sort of like millions of trans people, and if it's also true that if we don't affirm them, that it would cause them to commit suicide, then we should be able to look back in history and find just this unbroken, incredible epidemic of children mysteriously killing themselves because they weren't being affirmed as trans. And what you find is that that didn't exist. I mean, the youth suicide rate has increased exponentially alongside trans affirmation. So trans affirmation causes the suicide rate, not the other way around. The last thing I'll note is that the suicide rate among trans-identified people is sky high. It remains sky high. All the data shows this. It remains sky high even after surgery. And in fact, in the most reliable data that we have, it's years after surgery when suicidality is the highest for trans-identified people. That's the reality.
Yeah, so the Democrats, because they don't like facts, instead they try to discredit Matt Walsh as an individual who's not qualified to speak on this subject matter, and that didn't go very well for the Democrats either. Take a look.
Can you give us a summary of your educational background or your healthcare education experience?
Mr. Walsh, you recognized?
My experience in healthcare?
Your educational background. I'm just curious. You've testified as to a lot of your own research, so I'm curious for what purpose you do that and what background you have to qualifies you to speak to that.
Well, my background that qualifies me to speak to this is that I'm a human being with a brain and common sense, and I have a soul. And so, therefore, I think it's a really bad idea to chemically castrate children. That is my experience. Also, I did, now it's true, I didn't go to college, but I did go to school long enough to learn how to read, so I can read the data for myself, and that's exactly what I've done.
Representative Clemens, you're
And
recognized.
for what purpose do you conduct your research and use this brain of yours?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
I use it for the purpose of trying to protect children from being castrated and mutilated. That's one of the things I try to do.
You don't use it
Clemens.
to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You don't use it to get clicks on your
Let's state that.
publication.
Well, are you using it right now to try to get clicks with this interaction?
On,
No, I really like the
Mr.
idea
Walsh.
of getting of drawing attention to the fact that this is happening to children. I know you seem to find it very amusing. I don't.
Well, I gotta tell y'all, Matt Walsh is the man, especially when it comes to this subject right here. Okay, he does not hold back. Okay, yeah, I don't think that you need a degree in biology to understand basic biology or to understand the development of a human's brain and the fact that, you know, minors cannot consent to these types of gender reassignment surgeries, these types of procedures that are permanent. Okay, they don't understand the consequences. In fact, the Democrats, right, that are trying to get Matt Walsh with a gotcha, they actually went silent when Matt Walsh turned that very question back around on them about whether or not they believe that children, 16-year-olds, are old enough to consent to these types of surgeries. Take a look.
I found it, thank you, Mr. Walsh. I found it interesting. One of our people testified today that they had their gender-affirming surgery at 16. And I know you in former comments mentioned this on your blog. At about 16, you're an adult who is mature and can make decisions. You're that at 16. I don't care what anybody says. Even going so far as to say, you know, 16 people. When you're 16, you should be married and could be pregnant or should be pregnant. So I'm curious if 16 is an adult in your view. Why does this bill have the minor defined as 18?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
Yeah, that's a hit piece you took from Media Matters, from something when I was a radio host 13, 14 years ago, in my early 20s. It's also not an accurate reflection of what I actually said. I was talking about the fact that people tended to marry young historically, and that's all that was about. How does that relate to this subject?
Just curious of your definition of if you feel like people are adults at 16 should.
Well, people are
should
adults
this-
at 18, but actually your brain is not fully developed until you're 25. So we should be having a conversation about whether we should even be doing these surgeries to people at 18. But certainly before 18, it's absurd. I mean, do you think that a 16-year-old can meaningfully consent to having their body parts removed? Do you? No?
We do not, yeah, we ask the questions. It's not, it's, Representative Hammer, you are recognized.
Yeah, so that exchange was hilarious, okay? Because, of course, that Democrat didn't have an answer when asked, do you believe that a minor can consent at 16 years old? Because if he was to answer that question, it would make him look really, really bad, right? It would make him look really, really, really bad because if he said yes, again, somebody needs to be checking this man's laptop, right? Somebody check this man's laptop. And if he says no, then logically, that means that he should be against, these types of surgeries, right? He should be for the bill that is being debated on that would ban these types of procedures in the state of Tennessee. Right? Again, I love how the Democrats don't really want to talk. They don't want to answer any questions. When they lose, either way they answer the question. But again, that's the problem here. Because it should not be a bad thing when you say that, hey, I don't think that minors can consent until the age of 18. Right? That is what most reasonable people believe. And in this case, you can make the argument, which is what Matt Walsh was alluding to here, is that maybe, just maybe, kids should be forced to wait until they're at least 26, until they can actually undergo these types of life-changing procedures, right? These permanent procedures that they can't reverse because the brain's not fully developed, particularly the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until the age of 26, which means that, kids or young adults don't have the full capabilities of making decisions until the age of 26. I'm just saying. I think the more and more that, I learn about this subject, the more I'm starting to lean towards maybe it should be banned until the age of 26. Maybe it should be banned until the brain is fully developed. Okay, I'm starting to kind of get on board with that, right? I'm just saying, there's a strong argument for that. Okay, we know how many people end up regretting this type of stuff, and they're full-grown adults. They make the decisions. Again, imagine how many children are gonna grow up regretting these types of treatments and surgeries and stuff that are being pushed on them. Again, I think 10 years from now, we're gonna have a ton of kids, okay, with buyer's remorse. Okay, we're gonna have a ton of kids saying, why did you let this happen? Why did you let me make this stupid decision when I was 12, 13 years old? I'm just saying. And Democrats, they're the ones that are going to have to answer for that, because they're the ones that are pushing this stuff. Okay, they think that this is right. They think children can consent to, castrating themselves at the age of 16, and it's ridiculous. And I think that, Matt Walsh kind of revealed that and kind of highlighted that in this exchange here. And that's why I thought that this was worth sharing. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.